Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 25 best episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. Been doing this for a little while, I think over a year. It hasn't been a year of hell, it's been a good year. But yes, because I'm all the way up to my number 5. So now we're getting into the top 5 big head honchos, my favorite for me personally anyway. But joining me as always, we got Alyssa from Alyssa Jean Reviews. Alyssa, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, love to be here to talk about this great two-parter. And here we are in the top 5. Really excited. I've been with you since, not every one, but I've been with you since number 25. So one might say it's been a long road getting from there to here.
Indeed.
But happy to be here at number 5 talking about this amazing two-parter.
And Darrin from these reviews. Darrin, thanks for joining us once again.
Oh, so excited. I have been waiting for this episode to come out, and what a beautiful entry into the top 5 is this particular two-parter right here. So yeah, really excited to talk about this.
Oh yeah, I haven't mentioned, but you could probably tell from what we're talking about our usernames and the title of the video. Year of Hell is parts 1 and 2 is my number 5. Also, the other thing I would throw out first of all, I think I threw this out last week because now we're getting into the top stuff. Last week was my favorite Enterprise episode. This week is my favorite Voyager episode. This is my number 1 favorite Voyager episode. Turns out at number 5 overall. So overall thoughts on the episode. I just watched it and I gotta admit I got teary-eyed several times during the episode. To me, this is definitely the best of Voyager. It is using the premise of Voyager to its best. It's quintessential Voyager. I was just telling my fellow podcasters here that when we go down the episode, we'll go through character. And the reason why I decided to do that, because I usually go through the order of events, is because I think this is such a strong character story. So it really gets the pulse of the crew and shows them at their worst. Now, you might have noticed from some of the other episodes I've chosen on my top 25 so far, like yesterday's Enterprise, Damaged last week, or last month, I should say, and Deadlock earlier, that I tend to like the episodes where the shit they get their asses kicked, where they get the shit kicked out of them, because that sort of brings about I think that just when their characters really shine is when you can really do like in also Dominion War stuff and stuff like that, is when their characters really shine, when you see them at the most height. And so I think this two-parter took advantage of that. And I think the way that Brennan Braga messed with time, which he's all to do in episodes like Cause and Effect, Timescape, stuff like that, like this, I think is brilliant. He brings that sort of fucking with time mentality, but actually makes a good, like, that's coupled with a good character story, which is why I absolutely love it. And I think the bookends with the character of Anorex is how it starts with him and how it ends with him was beautiful. So it's a great use of guest star, great use of guest character, great guest actor, by the way. Yeah, and the music, I think this is one of the best pieces of music in all of Star Trek, in my humble opinion. Dennis McCarthy, one of his best scores. I think they've really let him shine. And yeah, I just think it is nearly a masterpiece. So, Darrin, we'll start with you on this one. Why were you waiting so much for this one?
Well, I mean, you kind of hinted on it on the really beginning, is this is the promise of the premise of Voyager right here, is how would a ship so far away from anything else connected to the Federation might survive and last and be affected by the events and the severity of the events around it. I know there was a discussion that there should be a whole season of this particular type of episode. I'm sure we'll get into all those particulars. But to me, it's the biggest cheat that they could do, because I know Voyager did not want, producers did not want a serialized structure. This had to be all episodic. So everything has to be reset effectively at the end. And I think by taking this into a two-parter and really giving you the sort of long-term effects of what these might be, this at least gave us as an audience like, yeah, this is how we were expecting Voyager to be beat up and damaged and people lost and the ship being stitched together. And while, of course, it did have the constrictions of that ultimate reset, kind of status by the end of the episode, I think allowing that particular longer breadth is the inkling of why these more serialized type stories can be so much more effective and can really, grab things and tell things. But you're right that ultimately, in some ways, that this is a story told through the eyes of a different character, of the villain, in effect, kind of adds a level of sympathy to it as well. So yeah, as usual with most of these, when they can really dive into meat, they do some great character studies, and they definitely had a supporting cast that made the most out of that.
Yeah, I would still argue the Voyager would have been a better show if they did do this for a whole season, and really not to this degree, but do something like this for the entire series, where we really see how Voyager is affected being cut off from Starfleet, and not that the whole ship. We've talked about this before. I believe we talked about it in the aforementioned. What I'm blanking on the name. You just mentioned it. The episode we did before with the
Damage.
No, with the
Deadlock.
Deadlock, where the ship was all like in shatters and everything, and then the next episode is pristine again. Where that happens a lot in Voyager, where there's no effects, like they don't have star bases to go to fix up their ship. That there should be ongoing consequences, and that was one of the great things about Damage that we talked about last month, is that there was actual consequences from the previous episode, and Voyager never did that. And I still say Voyager would have been a much better show if it did do that. However, failing that, this is a good this is a good consolation prize. Having these episodes, having these two episodes that show us what would happen if they did actually suffer some consequences from being cut off from Starfleet. And I also, this is kind of an underrated aspect of this episode that I don't talk about much. I don't think people talk about it much, but I love the timey-wimey aspect of this episode. I love the way that they use the manipulation of time. And I love that there's a species that has this weapon that manipulates time in this way. That kind of shit, that is my bread and butter. I love that shit. Plus what I talked about with the Voyager, seeing what it would look like if they suffered consequences. Plus what you both have been talking about so far with the character stories. We get, we're going to get into the characters, but of course, the character of Anorix getting a really interesting villain. And we see through. Well, I know we'll get into this more, but we see through the eyes of Chakotay that you can have some empathy for this villain. So really great villain, really great character stories all the way around. So this is just a fantastic set of episodes. I believe someone, Foz Ratton in the chat, said peak Voyager. 100%. This is peak Voyager. This is as good as it gets. If they had more episodes like this, I would like Voyager more than I do, as I don't really think Voyager overall is an amazing show. But these particular episodes are peak Voyager. They're the best Voyager gets. So absolutely love it.
So I was just reading up on the origin story of this episode, the idea where it came from, and of course it was based off they did an episode in season 3 called Before and After, which I actually hate that episode because it gets all soap opera with Cass having married to Tom Paris or some bullshit like that. But it's her going backwards through time, and she comes through an era where they call it an era of Year of Hell, which is different from this one because Janeway and B'Elanna died in that, and Chakotay became the captain, and people were like, "Oh, so this is how's this." Fit into the canon or whatever if they didn't die in this episode. I'm like, oh, the Crinum are fucking with the timeline, so that's what happened. Who cares? And that Kest isn't there. I don't really care about how it fits in. But that's so they hadn't thought of that idea when they wrote that episode. It was Brennan Braga didn't write that episode. It was, I think, Kenneth Biller. And he said that Brennan Braga got the idea from that episode because he saw how cool it looked, saw the image of the Voyager being destroyed and having to go through a year of hell. And he really latched on to that. So he wanted to do a year of hell. And him and all the writers pretty much agreed they wanted to do like a whole year where the Voyager was just getting the shit kicked out of them by the Crinum, and they go on different adventures and have to survive with their ship starting to fall apart. And of course, Mr. Rick Berman said no, because everything has to be episodic. You can't do
Where's your pillow, Mark?
Yeah. Close I can hit it. But yeah, so because he had the tight reins on Voyager, and it's funny because Brian Fuller, who had the original idea for Discovery before he was kicked off, and I think it was the showrunner for Hannibal, whatever. But he was a writer on Voyager at the time, and I was just reading a quote from him saying that that's why Deep Space Nine succeeded, is because of the serialization, and that's why Voyager was held back and didn't succeed as much as it could have, was because of the resistance to serialization. But so anyway, so Brendan Braga said, okay, let's do it as 3 episodes then. And Rick Berman, of course, is like, well, how about 2? So that's all he gave him. It just gave him 2 episodes. And he was like, well, at least, and part of the condition was, of course, that reset button had to be smashed. Now, I want to get into the thing of, see, here's the thing with me before I get into that, is that I still think this is an amazing episode. Like, would I prefer it if they'd done a whole year? Yes. Actually, the more I think about it, I think 8 episodes might have get after judging how season 3 of Enterprise went, because they sort of dragged on too long, making it be 24 episodes, maybe 8 episodes or something like, but something, a larger arc with larger consequences and no reset button at the end where they have to deal with the consequences of the ship falling apart. I did a video once where I did how I would write Voyager, and I mentioned that it would be an 8 episode arc, and there would be no reset button at the end, and the ship would keep going. So do I think it would have been better that way? Yeah. Would I prefer that? Yeah. I think the whole season 4, the whole show of Voyager would have been better. But does the fact that it did not do that, does that mean this episode sucks? Absolutely not. It's still an amazing episode. And so, yeah, so now let's get into, because Norman in the chat mentioned Steve Shives, because coincidentally he just dropped his review for this episode a couple days ago, and I started watching and turned it off in anger because I was so pissed off. He hated the episode. He said he quit watching Voyager because of it. He said it was completely pointless. They hit the reset button at the end, so none of the shit matters, so why are you wasting my time? And here's a question I have and he's not the only one I've heard give this opinion. I've heard many people give this opinion over the years. I've heard people shit on this episode and say, and there was even a meme online that showed Voyager ramming the Crinum ship at the end, and it had a giant reset button on it. And here's what I would say to all those people: why is yesterday's Enterprise a masterpiece and this completely pointless, when yesterday's Enterprise is pretty much all that was erased at the end? Sure, Guinan has some vague recollection of what possibly could have happened, But does that really make such a huge difference? Is that the huge difference that makes that a masterpiece and this pointless because Guinan has a vague recollection? Like, that makes no fucking sense to me. I'm sorry. And don't say it's the Sela shit. The Sela shit's dumb. That's not why people like yesterday's Enterprise. So, I want to rage on that. Like, how could people say it's pointless? Now, I'll let you guys talk soon because I know I've been talking for a while. But here's one more thing I want to say about this is that the fact that there is a reset button, it doesn't change the fact that we saw the characters. We saw how they would have behaved in this situation. It was them. It was true to them. Whether they remembered it or not, it's all fucking fiction anyway. So who cares if they remember it? We, the audience, remembers it. And it's true to their characters. It shows what they would have been like in this kind of situation. And, it's like watching an episode of What If, and I fucking love What If. So I don't think the reset button affects this episode at all. Would I prefer they not do that? Yes. Would I prefer they do lasting consequences like Enterprise did with Damage? Yes. But does it lessen the episode or make it pointless? Absolutely not. And anyway, sorry, I'll turn this over to you, Alyssa.
I mean, I would just be an echo chamber of what you're saying. I 100% agree with everything you just said. Yes, I would prefer that they have this be a lasting thing for a whole season or half a season or a quarter of a season or whatever, and for there to be lasting consequences, period, in Voyager. I've been beating this drum over and over again for years anytime that I've talked about Voyager. However, failing that, having these two fucking phenomenal episodes with amazing time travel stuff, with amazing character stories, like, who cares if they hit the reset button? You make such an excellent point. Why is this crap what yesterday's Enterprise is a masterpiece? Unless Steve Shives and other people also think that yesterday's Enterprise sucked too, but I kind of don't think they do. So, yeah, and you're right. Sela does not cut it. I was going to make a quip that, yeah, but Mark, but they have Tasha had a Romulan daughter who ended up being an evil mustache twirly villain. I mean, that made it all worthwhile. No, yeah, it doesn't really. There's a disconnect there that yesterday's Enterprise would be a great episode, and yet this one isn't because it hits the reset button. Yeah, I just don't buy that at all. I think that you just gotta hone in on what happens in the episode, the character stories that we do get, that this is real, that this happens. And this is not the only, yesterday's Enterprise isn't even the only episode that does this. What's that Enterprise episode I'm blanking on the name of with Archer? Twilight, which people also say is a great episode. It's pretty common to hit the reset button, to have a very interesting timey-wimey story and then hit the reset button at the end. I'm not so worried about hitting the reset button. It's the journey that we go on before we hit that reset button. It's the stories that we get to see. It's the character stories. It's the what if of it all, as you talked about. It's fantastic. So, yeah, I just couldn't possibly agree with you more, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to explain, to complain about what the actual structure of the episode. Structure of the episode is going to end the same way that everything begins, as all stuff does. So this takes an interesting journey. And yeah, I think very much like yesterday's Enterprise, there is an actual small change to the universe. From where the Kremen are when they first run into him going into the room, to when they run into him at the exact same time by the end of the events. And that even that post scene gives us an idea that no, in a way, their universe has actually changed by resetting this. It's not as dangerous. It's not as chaotic. There's a little bit of a shift. So, I mean, you can say that there is an ultimate payout to the whole thing. But yeah, the structure of the episode is ends up being a time travel story. And I actually love the fact that it does intentionally become that. How at the end, Janeway was like, turn off your shields. We're going to hit this thing. It should reset, as we've already established through the episode that it does. And we're going to make it work in our favor right now because this is a year I'd rather forget. You know, I mean, it's a beautiful way of actually using the constraints of the structure of the episode to tell a more interesting story. And ultimately, I think because it gives us that denouement at the very end, I think makes it entirely worth it, that there is something almost encouraging about the journey of hell that we just went through, that something good came out of this. So no, I mean, if you're complaining because of that reset button, then you're not really paying attention to Star Trek. I don't know. That's that. Their complaint is dumb. Let them be gone.
I want to reemphasize it's not just Steve Shives. I've heard this for like ever since this episode came out. I've been hearing this online repeatedly, which I just.
So you get the best episode that Voyager does. They go, yeah, but it's stupid because he. Yeah. Some people just want to be sad. Some people just want to be sad.
So none of the events in this, two-parter are ever referenced in Voyager ever again. So that makes it pretty much the same as almost every other episode of Voyager. So
yeah, every episode hits the damn reset button. Every episode does. That's why I don't like Voyager as much as Deep Space Nine or even TNG, or even like the format that you have in Strange New Worlds now, where it is episodic and yet there are through lines. Things build off of each other, and that was always the biggest problem with Voyager. So why are we like cherry picking this reset button when they always hit the fucking reset button?
Exactly.
Yeah, if the show was made 10 years later with a more sophisticated storytelling where they could do that type of serialized storying, yeah, that would be better. They weren't doing that at the time. So, it's a weird thing to complain about.
Voyager wasn't.
And besides, they reset the events of 1 2-parter, not 3 whole seasons. French, excuse me.
Oh, why did you have to bring that up? Why'd you have to bring that up?
Yeah, that's a terrible use of the reset button.
That was Alex Braitzman, right? Wasn't that?
Yeah, it was. It was.
Yeah.
Let's see, drink every time you get a new Harry Kim. Well, let's see. Norman pointing out they saved billions of lives to boot. That did happen. That's true. Like they did affect, even though they have no memory of it, they did affect events in that quadrant. Like Anorex's life is totally different. Now, there was one thing I heard Steve Shives complaining about. One of his nitpicks was, if Anorex all he had to do was bring his wife back was to destroy a ship, why didn't he just do that in the first place? Obviously because he didn't fucking know that. Like, how the fuck would he know? He's like, oh, he would know that. I'm like, how would he know that? How would he have any fucking idea that would be the consequence of destroying the ship? He doesn't fucking know. Anyway. And also he's like obsessed and wants to do it just perfect and make the Krypton Empire like this vast empire and have his wife back. He wants his cake and eat it too, and that's the whole fucking moral of the episode. Anyways,
that's the whole point of this tragic villain, that he doesn't get that it would be that simple, that that's all he would have to do. That's part of the tragedy of this story. This is like, it's just a classic, like Shakespearean style, tragic villain that he doesn't get how simple it would be, and instead he is obsessed with making everything so perfect, with perfection, that is this all along the answer was right underneath his nose. This is brilliant writing. Like, I can't believe, I'm sorry that I'm not pointing just at Steve Shives, but anyone who thinks that way, like, you're just missing the whole point. You're missing the whole point.
Absolutely.
If that obsessive would just calm down a little bit, they'd realize that their life is kind of okay. Why don't they do that? Because they're obsessive.
The whole point.
So yeah, Foz mentioned earlier that my cat was making biscuits while I was ranting, so she was having a good time. Anyway, so yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the episode. So let's start with Janeway, because I think this might be the best episode for Janeway. I think it's the best use of her episode where her character comes off as clear. I think because one of the complaints level that Janeway throughout the Voyager's run is that the writers are inconsistent for her, and I think that's actually true, that her character does become totally different depending on who's writing for her. But I think the the through lines that we get in this episode, they don't appear in like the entire rest of the show, but when they do, I think that's when the character's at her best. That it shows her again getting into the whole obsessiveness. It's kind of a theme, not just for Anorax, but for her as well, as she's completely obsessed with getting her crew home, and how that's driving her to her detriment, particularly in part two, where she's risking her life and doing all these risky things. And that scene with the doctor, and he tries to relieve her of duty, and she's just like, you can get a phaser and shoot me because that's the only thing in the way you can stop me. Like that, this just fucking intense. Like it was such good character moments. That she becomes obsessive, and that's why she didn't want to separate, abandon, have the crew separate at first, because she was intent on staying together, but eventually she had to face the fact that she needed that's what they needed to do and get home. And that was such a heartfelt scene, that ending of part one where she's giving the speech of having to abandon ship. Like, I don't give a fuck if that's reset or not. That's I think that is such a truly amazing golden moment for her, probably one of the best character moments. And of course, my favorite moment of the episodes, one of my favorite moments of the entire show, is towards the end of part two, when she elects to stay on the ship and she has that sort of conversation with Tuvok. I think the music in the scene is so beautiful. I think is the most beautiful piece of music in the show, and the acting between Janeway and Tuvok is just, I think, is one of the best performances for both actors. Is that Tuvok tries to convince her, like, you don't need to stay for the ship. The ship has done nothing. It's just a collection of bulkheads. And she's like, no, you're wrong. It's nurtured us in the way she talks about it, like a caring way, and then gives Tuvok a hug. And that look on her face as she's like hugging him, where she feels all the pain, but then she shakes it off and just lets Tuvok leave with seven. It's beautiful. I was definitely shedding a tear during that scene. And so, and of course, can't talk about Janeway in this episode without mentioning her badass Schwarzenegger line at the end of the episode, when she realizes she's going to ram Voyager into the ship. She says, "Time's up." Like, what a fucking beautiful way to end. Yeah, time's up, bitch. But yeah, what a beautiful way to end the episode. So yeah, I think her whole character arc throughout these two parters was just simply amazing, by far the best for her character in this show. Darren, we'll start with you on Janeway.
Well, yeah, because like anything else, this gives an opportunity to have an actual full arc for her. You can see, she is the standard Janeway there, and hopeful and wanting to keep everything together, and the kind of difference in fight that we have with Chakotay there at the beginning, with about, are we going to have to let people go, or do we want to try and keep them together? And at the end, realizing, yeah, at a stage, that may have to be a decision that you have to make. Where you see from her being so fixated on keeping everybody alive and focused, the gift that she gets from Chakotay, no, take it back, because that could be somebody's meal or an extra part or a thing that we need to keep us going. Where then after he is gone and it's rediscovered, this becomes this valuable keepsake to drive her forward. It really is just a beautiful, it gives Janeway the best, like you said, the best chance to really track an idea and an evolution of character through circumstances. Because you're right, does get rewritten so many times, and her motivation shifts and change. And is she strong? Is she understanding? Is she, taciturn? Is she obsessive? She really gets to have a full journey here, and all of it makes sense. Where at the end, you can see where it's like, yes, we're going to sacrifice. We're going to try and redo this. We're going to give it all up. We're going to have a badass, Schwarzenegger line at the end. And it's going to be in a hope that it will be all fixed by the time that we finish this, this particular journey. So it's, and the fact that I love that she gets totally burnt up, and, it should be a little bit more than I think they do with the makeup at the end, which is just like a little skin flap and a little like darkness on part of her hand. But to me, yeah, that would have been a great series of episodes where she's wounded and all burnt, but still having to push. And then later on, they find like some way to heal her skin if they want to get back to, not having to do heavy makeup for the character for the remainder of the show. Those types of things are where serialized storying, I think, really would have played into that, to have all of these moments really have a consequence, an internal arc within themselves, and a whole journey within there. But, you didn't have time for that. But the fact that they were able to give her really such a clear journey within this episode and a consistency for motivation and reflection back, I think it was the best thing that you could do for the character. Again, considering that, unfortunately, the consistency of character isn't always there over larger stretches of episodes.
Now, I'm going to confess something I told Mark and Darren before we got on here, is that this is the one time in the top 25 where I did not have time to rewatch the episode right before coming on. So I saw it a year ago, most recently. So correct me if I'm wrong. In that doctor scene, does she not also threaten to shut down his program if he...
Yes, she does, but she apologizes for it and says, yeah, that was wrong of me. I'm definitely not going to shut you down, but I'm still not staying here.
Yeah, but the fact that she even said it in the first place, that just shows like how dedicated she is to this ship, and like, oh, you're going to relieve me of duty? I'll shut down your fucking program. Even if she didn't mean it, just even saying that. And this has been, with all the inconsistencies of character that you guys have talked about, I feel like this is probably one of the most consistent things that we do see throughout the show, is that her dedication and, as you said, obsession even with her ship, with her crew, with getting the ship and the crew home safely. And that is this character at her best. And when we did our yesterday's Enterprise discussion, I theorized that Catherine Garrett may have been the kind of template for Janeway, because Catherine Garrett was very much that same way in the yesterday's Enterprise.
Rachel Garrett.
I said Captain Garrett.
I thought you said Captain. Sorry.
No, I said Captain Garrett.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Captain Garrett, which both names are accurate, Rachel Garrett and Captain Garrett. The Captain Garrett, was the same way as Janeway, that I theorize that they probably maybe even used her as kind of the template of the Janeway character. And that is one of the most consistent things about her. And that these episodes like really demonstrate that beautifully, like really take it to the extreme. Like, this is the extreme case. Like, how far is Janeway willing to go to protect her crew? And we see at the end, she's willing to sacrifice everything. And that I echo again that the scene between her and Tuvok, I believe people were also talking about it in the chat as well. Just such a powerful scene, because it is Janeway at her Janewayist. Like, she is just as Janeway gets. Yeah, I'm sorry. I keep harking back onto not just Steve Shives, but that opinion in general. It's just like, how can you not appreciate this? How can you not? Oh my god! But yeah, this is. I mean, this is just the pinnacle in Janeway episodes because yeah, especially once we get into season 5, there are some episodes. I know that you'll know what particular episodes I'm talking about, but there are certain episodes where she just the way that they write her just really pisses me off because they just turn her into a completely different human being, and it really really irritates me. Equinox, excuse me, Equinox. But uh, and then there's season 5. I think to me was like the beginning and the end for Janeway, where it's just they're so topsy turvy with how they write her. And then season 6 and 7, she's basically a side character behind the Doctor in 7 of 9, and especially season 7, which I call the Doctor in 7 of 9 show. I think I even wrote a little theme song about it once. So it's the Doctor in 7 of 9 show. Janeway is just a side character. So this season 4 was really Janeway at her best, and these particular episodes I think is like the best the Janewayest of Janeway we will ever see.
I mean, I think she has a few good episodes in the last 3 seasons, but yeah, I definitely agree that
It's just inconsistent. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Not that she doesn't have any good episodes in the later seasons, but it's so topsy turvy and that they're all over the place with how they write the character. I think that comes more in the later seasons than the first 4, by my recollection. That they really kind of go all over the place with how they write the character. And not that there still aren't good episodes like this for her, but this is just kind of Janeway at her peak.
Well, and I think what makes this work is kind of what you had hit on before is the treatise on obsession that the episode really is. You know, from Anorax's obvious viewpoint of wanting to get perfection and find the one, move that can make it all right. To Chakotay following up and almost slipping into that type of thing, and then Janeway kind of on the other end of Anorax there, obsessed with keeping the ship, the Federation, the family together, and then getting back and having to manipulate those obsessions to kind of get that clarity of what's important at the end. I think that gave the writers at least a nice chance to really get a focus on the issues that she hits, whether she is just going to obsessively push through and turn on the deflector screen and get all burnt and everything, or to tell the Doctor, yeah, you're going to have to shoot me in order to get me out of here because I'm going to stay being the captain, to, her willingness to sacrifice herself in order to try and save everybody else. It's all obsession, but I think that it gives a nice focus for her character to see how she deals with that and eventually even kind of sheds it somewhat.
And I was thinking when I was watching, particularly the final scenes of the episode, is how epic like this. It's not only as it has all these great character stuff, great timey-wimey stuff, and just how epic it is that this is like better. Although you could probably say this is about a lot of Star Trek 2 parters, but it's better than any of the Next Generation movies. Like, it's funny when they try to do the TNG movies, they just try too hard, and there's too many studio cooks, and they don't get it right. But when they're not trying, and like in a 2-parter like this is when they really hit it. Or, I mean, they are trying, but the studio's not interfering as much, I should say. Like the studio isn't trying as much. But
trying to make this big blockbuster and appeal to millions of people.
Yeah, exactly.
which was the downfall of First Contact, but we'll need to get into that.
But yeah, because I was actually just watching First Contact last night, and I was thinking, God, this is so much better. But anyway, like the moment when during the battle at the end, when the other ship like gets hit and rams into Voyager, and like the view screen is just ripped from you. You see Janeway like at her like completely like disheveled, and there's like the big hole in the screen, and she can see the ship like. It's fucking brilliant. But then anyways, it's like so epic. But another one of my favorite Janeway moments I absolutely love is when she comes across the watch that Chakotay had given her. Like that was such like that again was almost like a tearjerker scene because she had like, oh, destroy it or whatever. But after like months, Janeway had been abducted, or Chakotay had been abducted, and she wasn't sure she'd ever see him again. And she comes across the watch and like puts it on. It's like, how's it look? And I was like, and she had that realization he didn't destroy it. And so in that moment, she realized that what he was saying was true, that they have to hold like dear. It's not just about surviving. It's about being true to each other and like, respecting each other. And it was just it said all this in just a simple moment. It was just like so beautiful.
I'm getting a little bit teary-eyed.
I don't have anything to add on to that.
But it doesn't matter because the reset button was hit anyway. Sorry. I'm sorry. I need to let that go. But how can anyway?
Chakotay's made that watch 1,000,000 times. She always throws it away.
All right. So speaking of Chakotay, let's get into his storyline. Now, this wasn't a big episode for him, but he did have those moments like the reminding Janeway was true, and plus you get another like good, like this wasn't long after Scorpion this episode came out, so you get another good captain first officer scene when he first goes to her and says, look, we should abandon ship because we're never gonna make it. And I love how he like frames it like tough love. Like, yeah, look, we got to face facts. What we're doing is not going to working, and we're going to get destroyed pretty soon if we keep going like that. We need to change our tack. But then, of course, Janeway was resistant to that, saying that, no, we need to stay together. And I think her reasoning was actually really sound. Like her saying that the moment we split apart, they're going to pick us off one by one. We're stronger together. But eventually, after Chakotay's abducted, she realizes that what he was saying was true, and then goes through with it. And then the whole thing with the watch, as I just talked about. But then his storyline continues in part 2, where we get him on the Anorex side of thing, where he starts to become pulled into Anorex's circle of the obsession with, no, if we just pull this right. You can tell the way, like, it was kind of beautiful the way that Anorex was enticing him, being like, I know a way that I can get what I want and you can get what you want, and we have to do is work together. And that he was like pulled into that. And you had this great scene between him and Tom, where I love where Tom Paris, like, because he realized it was bullshit and he could see that he even told Chakotay outright, like, he's flattering you and you're falling for it. And I love when Chakotay gave him an order and Tom Paris is like, yeah, what orders make any difference? What does that care? And he's like, well, if we can't follow the chain of command, then we'll have to, settle things the old fashioned way. But eventually he can see for himself, like, Chakotay wasn't so far gone that once he did see Anorex like wipe out a civilization on a whim, he could like see for himself, like, okay, no, I am falling into this, and eventually did do the right thing. So yeah, I mean, not Chakotay didn't factor that much into this episode, but I still think again it was a good use of him. So Alyssa, we'll start with you.
Actually, I really think he factored a lot into part 2 in particular with the Anorex story, because I always think of that. I always think of that when I think of this episode. I think it's one of the more interesting stories, and that Chakotay did fall into Anorex's trap a little bit and was swayed by him, and it's 100% believable. Like, I think that is extremely rare. I think one of the most annoying things for me that television shows and films have done over the years that just really gets under my skin when they try to make oh, look, this good character is being evil, and it's just making them completely out of character. And whether it's with mind control or whatever means that they're doing it, oh, look, this is what the character would be like if it was evil. This is why I can't stand Descent Parts 1 and 2, especially Descent Part 2 from the Next Generation, because what they do with Data, they do the same thing with the Doctor and Equinox. that kind of thing where it's just, it makes no sense. It's not believable. It's just like, ooh, look at this character being evil. But Chakotay isn't really being evil. He's just kind of being persuaded by Anorex, and it's 100% within his character, and it is totally believable. And then it is also believable when Chakotay, at the end, like, realizes his mistake and sees Anorex for what he is, like, oh, I was wrong. That's good writing. That's good storytelling. And Robert Beltran, I think, is a good actor when he has good writing to work with, which we won't talk about the boxing episode or anything beyond season 4, but when he has good material to work with, I think he does well with it. So I actually think he's kind of an underrated part of at least part 2 anyways. I've always found this storyline pretty interesting.
No, I think they did the best that they can with Chakotay in this. They do give him something to do, and you're right. It's believable because they don't overdo it. They play with, and you could see he's captured. They all got tortured for a little while. Then they got some good foods, that always puts you in a good mood. Then you see an opportunity. Hey, this guy likes me. Maybe I could earn his trust in order to get in. And he's showing me something very interesting. And I get my hand at it, and he compliments me, but shows me where it's wrong. And then we seem like we can still figure this thing out. You're right. It's a totally believable way where he doesn't fall under the sway or anything, but he's doing the best he can within those circumstances. And how can he end up best helping? And I think, it works totally well. And the fact that he does pull himself back and then realize, once Anorex wakes up, I had inspiration. I'm just going to wipe out this one civilization. Let's see what happens. Not that good. Oh, well, anyway, breakfast and a scone. Let's go. Suddenly we're like, he is not as a careful scientist as we were sort of relaying with the let's be careful with all of these calculations. So, it is a nice wake-up call. And again, it's just because they don't let anything go too far. Even if he's disagreeing with Tom, he's still like, figure your stuff out, but don't do anything until we get to it. They're still being Starfleet. They're just doing the best in those circumstances. And you can see in a circumstance where, wait, can I make an adjustment and just fix all of the time issues that we have, and we just go back like nothing ever happened? How can you not at least look into that, given the opportunity when you're, out in the Delta Quadrant? So no, I really think they did a great job with Chakotay, and giving him a real reason to have an arc and have a counter, but still have that connection in with Janeway throughout the whole thing. Though I do have to say, when he initially got beamed away with Tom, I thought he was just like crewman number 3, because I didn't remember seeing him like age up with his little beard or the little scruffiness that he had. It was like, who's it that needed? Wait a minute, what happened to Chakotay? They said he got beamed away. He was scruffy guy. So still caught me up on this episode, even though I've already seen it before and I know what happens.
But that brings up like the way that they changed the makeup on the actors and made them look tattered and worn, and the whole set. I love the aspect of the whole set like falling apart. Like, I think it was even definitely like the ship was probably worse off than even the Enterprise was in damage. That aspect of it was...
Well, and they didn't bother fixing things too. It's like, well, once that beam fell, nobody's picking that beam up again. It's down.
I figured they were focused on more important things.
Sure.
I think that does make sense.
Of course. Yeah. It was just, again, it's one thing, like if this was serialized, there is a little few twists and stretching out and not quite as damaged and maybe a little repair work here. But yeah.
Yeah, no, but I totally agree with what you were saying, Alyssa, about the character of Chakotay. You buy the fact that he could like be working with the villain because you don't even see him as much as like turning evil so much as like, you know, believing in the stuff that he's saying and thinking, oh, we can help everyone, we can save everyone. So yeah, totally believable. And again, watch First Contact last night with Data being like resistance, like, you know, being like, I'm gonna be evil and destroy it. That's so dumb. Like, just don't even do that stupid bullshit. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, but if you're an android or an artificial life form of any sort, then you can just flip a switch. And
Yeah, of course. So dumb.
I never thought the Borg looked as cool in the movies as they did in the show. They just got like wetter and greener, I guess. I don't know.
All right, so
Get me started.
indeed. So let's move on to Tuvok in 7 of 9. So
Uh-oh.
right after, oh shit. Hold on.
Okay,
I'm back. You can see
you're
me.
back. Yeah, you're back.
All right, so this was shortly after 7 of 9 joined the cast, so she was still kind of early, so they weren't that sure about her character, so I think that's why she wasn't used all that much. But I think I like the aspects that she was used for, like building astrometrics, and the way she was like that moment where she was stubborn and wanted to get the time variance, which is also a plot point for before and after, by the way, getting the time variant of the torpedo. So they sort of shared that in there, that's the key to getting the temporal shielding that would ultimately protect them, and that it cost like Tuvok went blind because of that, and so because of that, 7 of 9 was sort of taking care of him. And they had a nice, like, there was a pairing that you didn't see that often, but I always liked it when they did. I think they were always an interesting pairing, Tuvok and 7 of 9, because, you know, they're logical Borg and logical Vulcan. They're kind of both kind of emotionless, but in different ways. They got different demeanors, and I think they made a pretty good team. And I think it was an interesting aspect to it to have 7 of 9 being the one, like Tuvok's caretaker or helper after he went blind. So yeah, I think that was a nice little added moment. And Tuvok sort of became the default first officer after Chakotay got abducted as well, which yeah, and as we already talked about, that nice moment between Tuvok and Janeway at the end was awesome. So yeah, I thought these characters were used well as well. I mean, they didn't have a full arc per se, but Tuvok's arc was more of being the rock, like for Janeway, like being there to support her. And he never questioned her. It was the Doctor who did. And in fact, they had that one scene where 7 of 9 is just like, "You're wrong," flat out to Janeway. And he went to her and said, "Just remember this one rule: the captain's always right." And so that was sort of his role, was to be supporting her even when she was in. Yeah, 7 9's response was, even when she's wrong. He's like, perhaps. So even when she was wrong, she's right, and that was just how they got by. So I think that was a nice sort of solid, even though again they didn't have the whole lot to do in this two-parter, it was still a solid addition. Alyssa, we'll start with you with Tuvok and 7.
Yeah, I remember that "Captain's always right" line. That kind of gives me a little bit of the shivers because it reminds me of when I worked in customer service and there was that line. "Captain's always right." I'm like, the fuck they are. That line reminded me of that a little bit, except that it's in this case it's true because she's the captain, and I do love that exchange where even when she's wrong, perhaps, yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, I don't really have, I guess, a lot to add to what you said, because there's not really a whole lot to these characters, but yeah, the 7 of 9 and Tuvok pairing I've always found interesting because, as you said, they both kind of logical, emotionless beings in their own ways, but in different ways. And when they've been put together, I've always found that really interesting. So I think these episodes just do just do a fantastic job with all the characters, even the characters that maybe aren't as pronounced, maybe don't have as big of a role to play. That they're able to find this perfect pairing between these two characters and make them fit into the story and have their own roles, even if they're not like the most important characters in this arc. So yeah, I don't really have much more to add to it. I kind of pretty much agree with what you said.
Well, I mean, and of course we did have, these show crossover admitting the connection to here with the motion picture of First Contact, because she does talk that there is a born collective memory of the circumstance, but she can't get into it right now. So yeah, that was the big nerd moment in with the episode. Oh, she mentioned it, that's the thing, yeah. But yeah, it was, again, I think what was really nice, even though this was early with Seven of Nine's character, they did manage to give her an actual arc while her focus on getting, the variance number there that actually ended up being good for the Chronoton, that ends up causing Tuvok's blindness, and she softens to a certain extent because of that, and then does have more of a carrying and potential. So they actually do give her a little bit of an arc in with this, even as we have Tuvok becoming more of the kind of like calmer, more education, even when she's wrong, maybe. There's that little bit of kind of humblishness. So I mean, they do, I think, for bringing a new character and actually giving her something that I think does in a way play with the older, that does come a direction that Seven of Nine does eventually take. We just get in a way a sneak preview of some of that change. So yeah, you said not a whole lot there outside of movie connections and just kind of having a good sneak preview of a character arc that we may see Seven of Nine, eventually take in with the show.
All right. So, let's see. So let's talk about the Doctor. So I think this is, if I remember correctly, I think this is one of the first episodes. We had this scene at the very beginning of the episode when they were opening the astrometric lab, and where he like starts to become like give a speech and everyone's like here, and he just keeps talking and they're like, oh, shut up, and then someone calls and they all run away. He's like, oh, let's get back and talk. I think if I remember correctly, I think this was the first time they had him do something like that. This would become like a running thing. I think it was fine in this episode, but like later seasons that like took this to an extreme just make is that had the like overbloated ego or whatever. So maybe, so that part of it I wasn't that keen on, but it was okay in this episode. But later though, they give him a nice arc where he has to leave these two people to die when he has to close off this corridor, or otherwise, everyone would die. So in order to save everyone on the ship, he had to let these two people die, and how that was affecting him. And this shows that even though he's, a hologram artificial being, he definitely had like affected him emotionally. You can tell that he was getting like pissed off, yelling at Paris, now do this, blah, blah, blah. And, and Paris could tell. It was like he went right on. It was like, I can tell that something's affecting you. And he brought it up. So that was a nice little moment. And also it really, again, it's the episode's taking full advantage of the premise of a ship falling apart and having to make tough decisions like this. It's why one thing I hadn't mentioned yet is Ronald D. Moore, who didn't work on Voyager, well, he did for 2 episodes and then quit because he hated it. But he said that this 2-parter is what the whole show should have been like. He's like, this is what the whole show of Voyager should have been like. And so you get, and it reminded me of Battlestar Galactica or stuff like that.
I was going to say, yeah, that means that he did it, went ahead and made that the whole show.
Yeah.
For Galactica.
Where they always have to make tough decisions and like that.
Yeah.
But I think it really worked for the Doctor, and that it really it was interesting seeing this artificial being have that affect him emotionally and how that affects his character. And then, of course, in part 2, he has the arc with Janeway where she's, constantly trying to kill herself, and he flat out like relieves her of duty, but she denies it and says, "You'll have to hold me with the phaser." And he's just like, "Well, I'm gonna put this in a report, and you'll be court-martialed." She's like, "All right, fine. If we get home, I'll be happy to be court-martialed." But yeah, so I think the Doctor had his good moments as well. Darren, we'll start with you.
Yeah, you're right. I think again, if anything, you're going to be showing consequence throughout these 2 episodes, because it is loss and damage. It is the year of hell where you're just getting beaten back, and that everybody has a particular experience with this type of loss. We had Tuvok obviously loses his vision. The Doctor here, kind of loses a bit of himself in having to close the store and weigh that over and the cost of what those are. And the fact that you are going to have that moment with the holographic Doctor character is, I think, an excellent choice to use an actor of Robert Picardo's, capabilities, in that role, and really have something kind of interesting for this character to sort of play with and ponder with. So yeah, I mean, I love that you're getting those choices, and then again, the still consequence of the obsession of what the captain's going with and how he, as the Doctor, is going to have to deal with it. And yeah, I mean, I love the idea of like, well, I'm not going to shoot you, but I'll put it down in my report. Oh, I'm gonna write you up. But I think he also kind of sees that way. If he goes as far as he can to actually relieve her of command because of the safety considerations. I just need you to rest for a little bit.
Well, and the interesting thing though is that he says that she has PTSD, and he's right. Like, he's 100%.
Oh, sure. But it's also, limited. You got limited crew here. The ship's falling apart. You've got to get things done. How are you going to hold this up? And is it really a good use of resources to put the captain in a brig and have someone guard her and whichever and take up all of those resources in something that's just going to end up complicating things anyway? So it's like, yeah, the cost that you have to make in these types of circumstances and the compromises that you have to make within all of these circumstances. And I just think they did a great job in, I think, overall choosing characters to tell particular storylines and these arcs within them. And I think that's just another thing that showed this 2-parter did really well, is making the right choices with the right people to have the right arcs.
And yeah, the Doctor wasn't wrong about Janeway, but I mean, when you take a step back and look at it, it's a little ridiculous that he's still holding on to these rules and regulations as if anything is normal at all, as if the whole ship isn't falling apart, as if it makes any sense to put the captain in the brig, especially when the first officer is gone, and that any of that makes any sense, or that you're going to court-martial anyone when you're like, not only far away from home and far away from any kind of court-martial, but the ship is literally on its last legs. It's barely functioning anymore. There's barely any crew anymore. It really, actually, if you take a step back, it is kind of ridiculous to make that suggestion, but I think it's kind of the Doctor really clinging on to like normalcy. It's like clinging to what he knows, and it is all a part of what he went through with. I think that he is still dealing with having to shut the door on those 2 officers, and like he's trying to cling to something that feels normal and right to him, which is very interesting when you consider that he's a hologram, but he has a very it's a very well-rounded character, just as Data is. The Star Trek is good at making these artificial intelligence characters that are very, very human. It's a very interesting arc. That's kind of how I view it. I think the Doctor's like still clinging to like a sense of normalcy when really, regardless of whether Janeway has PTSD or not, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to to relieve her of duty, put her in the brig or whatever, and threaten her with court martial. Ooh, oh no! Like, what court martial? What do you? And it doesn't actually make a lot of sense in these circumstances. But I mean, you see this in a lot of apocalyptic type fiction. It's been a while, but I'm sure you see it in BSG too, where characters are clinging on to something that's normal, and I think that would be a natural human response. I think that if we ourselves were in an apocalyptic type situation, we would want to be clinging into a sense of normalcy.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true that the Doctor was definitely clinging on to normalcy. But I also think that he had somewhat of a glimmer of a point, or at least part of a point, that Janeway's was being very reckless and that she probably wouldn't endanger anyone else, but definitely herself. That because of her recklessness, she could end up damaging herself, which would hurt the crew overall. But yeah, he didn't really. His solution was to just lock her in the room, which was impractical. So that again, it's like what you were saying. He was acting as if everything was normal when it clearly wasn't.
Yeah, no, it's not that he's wrong. He's absolutely right. Janeway was a complete danger to herself, potentially a danger to her crew. But the point is, there really isn't an alternative in those particular circumstances.
I mean, considering that she did just threaten to have him deactivated, I think he took that kind of in stride very well. He's like, the very fact that you would say such a thing just shows you how bad things are off. How far that you've gone.
Well, she did apologize.
No, it's true. And he did it in the very Doctor way, very gentle, like, the fact that you would even say such a thing, But yeah, again, they're pushing the limits. And if the circumstances were in any way more normal, one of these, she might have been able to cave. He might have been able to get away with that. That might have been able to happen. But under these circumstances, yeah, that would be nice for her to be able to be confined to quarters and be forced to rest while someone else took care of things. But there is nobody else. It's just them.
All right, so next, talk about Tom Paris, and the main thing to talk with him is basically part 2 when he's taken on board the Anorex's ship. And I love the introduction where Anorex is like, "Oh, your friend is being," it's like complaining about him, and he doesn't have any manners, and he doesn't report himself, blah blah blah. I wish we actually saw more of that, but so the thing with Tom Paris is probably gets into my least favorite aspect of the episode, although it handles it well, because it's a trope that when done incorrectly can really piss me off, and like I think it'd be one of the worst things ever is the getting the underlings or the crew to turn against the captain. But in this case, as I said, like I still like it. Like it still works. It's not done in a cliche, stupid way where it's like they go up to the idiot henchman and be like, "Oh, you're actually really smart." But this way actually makes a lot of sense because they are disgruntled and they have every reason to be disgruntled because they've been stuck following this obsessed madman, and they're getting tired of it and they just want to go home. And Tom Paris takes advantage of that, and again he gets into a little sort of kerfuffle with Chakotay, but he's able to see, unlike Chakotay, he's able to see through Anorex's bullshit and able to see what Anorex, how he's manipulating Chakotay, and ultimately wins Chakotay back to the right side and also wins over Oberisk and the crew, and is able to basically he's due to him. That's why they won, because he gave Janeway the coordinates. So I think that was true to his character, his not giving a shit, kind of not caring about following the rules and just doing what needs to be done. I think, yeah, I like the way he was portrayed as well. Alyssa, we'll start with you.
Yeah, once again, I'd probably just echo a lot of what you said. I totally agree that I cannot stand that trope of we're gonna. Oh, you should. It's like when I think one of the worst examples that comes to mind is that stupid Ferengi episode in Enterprise where where Archer was like, "Oh, but you should be better than they are," and that I cannot stand that, but it works really well here because you buy that the characters are already kind of they're tired, they're disgruntled, they're like, why are we doing this? We saw that even a little bit in part one. We've seen what was that dude's name again? Oberisk.
Yeah, Oberisk. Yeah,
That he has been questioning Anarix all throughout, and you could see it over time really wearing on them, and so Tom Paris is just taking advantage of an already kind of disgruntled crew, and I mean they were already almost there, and they just needed a little push. And I think Tom Paris is a good character for this role because, as you said, he's kind of not necessarily a play by the rules kind of guy, that he does what needs to be done, and so yeah, I think this was a good role for him. Again, overall, I feel like good writing because I think they're finding the best roles for each character. When I think of this episode, I don't immediately think of Tom Paris, but he does play the right role. I think this really works for him. And yeah, they make a trope that can be really bad if not done well. They make it work really well, and they use exactly the right character in Tom Paris in doing that.
Yeah, I've always found that Tom is one of the multitude of characters that's often difficult to really find writing or a character arc or consistency with. I don't know. I think the chemistry of a bridge crew ends up being really important, and nothing proves that quite like Voyager from the opposite direction. But I completely agree with Alyssa. I think the strength of this episode is using Tom right. And this is the way that you do it. You don't have to overdo it. You've got the little annoying stuff in part one, but once that he is gone, then he just plays that guy that's pushing back on Tom Paris, and then we'll check out the other crew. And he's always in that particular, don't listen to anyone, fly by the seat of my pants mindset, which is, I think easy to put into this particular role. Like anything else, I think it succeeds also because they don't overdo it. I think his finding the connection with Oberisk and the fact that the crew does have their own issues and things like that, I think they play that very naturally, as opposed to, as you both have mentioned, the too often done route of the kiss ass or let's see this or you're more capable or anything like that, which just becomes this whole kind of crazy little arc here. I think that they keep it subtle and simple enough where everything just sort of falls into place. All they have to do is plug the character in the right place, and it makes it work. So yeah, for doing a Tom Paris bit, they found Tom Paris, I think, something very Tom Paris-y to do. And that's kind of a win.
All right, so I'm just gonna lump three characters together who don't have a whole lot to do in the two-parter: Neelix, Harry Kim, and B'Elanna. They still have good character moments, though. Like Harry and B'Elanna had that moment where they're trapped in the turbolift and they're playing the trivia game. To me, it doesn't make sense why people in the 24th century would be talking about movies from the 1940s or 1950s. It's like the whole Enterprise movie night bullshit. But why are they only watching movies before 1970? But anyway,
they stopped making movies in 2032, so we only get 5 more years of movies, folks. 6 more years.
What happened, Mark, was when they had the nuclear wars in the mid 21st century, they lost all records of all the movies made after 1970. So the only thing they had left,
all that was left was the Turner Classic Movies server. That was it.
Exactly.
Like I didn't even know. I'm a movie buff, and I didn't know the answers to these fucking trivia questions. I don't know anything about 40s movies, but anyway. But no, it was good character moments though. And it showed again. It was taking advantage of what the crew would be like when the ship is falling apart, how they depend on each other, and how they're in that rough situation where it's life and death and they need to take their mind off it. So they're just playing a trivia game to keep their mind off of it. And of course, that allows 7 of 9 to do the first contact mention. but no, those are good character moments. And again, Harry didn't have that much to do for this episode, but he had like a lot of subtle moments. He was still like a rock for Janeway, like at the end when she gave that speech about leaving the ship, like in part 2 when they were going to leave the other ship, he just gives her this look, like you could tell like how much he admires her and how much he supports her. So just those subtle things work. And as far as Neelix goes, he has that one funny line, which I did think was a kind of funny line, when he was saying, "Oh, how should we do the intruder alert? Should we do intruders amongst us? Danger! Danger! Intruders amongst us!" And Tuvok's just like, "Intruder alert will do fine." You're with the classic. I see. Yeah, and I think they always do these Tuvok and Neelix jokes, but to me, that's one of the better ones of the season, of the show. I mean, because sometimes they can get really annoying. Sometimes I think Tuvok can be a condescending dick to Neelix, and it just pisses me off. But that kind of interaction like that makes sense. And also, he's wearing a security uniform. He's wearing a Starfleet uniform. This kind of thing they toyed with in season 3 and 4, but then dropped it, where he wanted to be a security officer. And so it makes sense in this situation where the ship is like falling apart. Okay, you can be a security officer. The ship's falling apart. Why not?
Community security officer.
Yeah, there you go.
He gives directions. Yes.
But I don't know why he's so essential he gets to stay on the ship. But anyway, because he's the main character, of course. But no, I thought it was a good use of him as well. So yeah, I thought these 3 characters, again, even though they weren't used that much, they still were rang true to their character, and they were still written very well. Darren, we'll start with you.
Yeah, not really a whole lot more to add. I mean, you keep Neelix around because somebody has to make up the emergency rations with, particular spices and combinations and.
Yeah, no, you keep him around so people can complain about his cooking.
Exactly. You got to have a focus. It's all morale. It's all morale working. No, again, there's not a whole lot for any of these characters to really do, but they do what they are given perfectly. And yeah, Neelix has his little security alert moment, and Harry Kim gets to be supportive, and B'Elanna gets to look confused. And everybody, they're doing their parts well. But yeah, as I said, I think they really give everyone exactly what's needed to do in order to bring the story forward without really dragging anything down. That's the one nice thing is there weren't really any bits in this that dragged down or were like, let's move on or whatever. I think everything kind of really held its own well. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of kudos to everyone for pulling that off.
Yeah, I mean, well said. I've been kind of saying something similar throughout this stream, that they found the best way to use each character, even if the characters, don't have huge roles to play. Yeah, I have been on Team Anti Neelix since like Team Against Neelix since Voyager came out. I've been one of those people that never really liked Neelix. When I did my rewatch of Voyager a couple years ago, there were moments where I did appreciate him a little bit more. I think if they use him correctly, he's actually not a bad character. And this is an example. Like, I think that they were able to find a way to utilize Neelix as a little bit of comic relief in a way that makes sense, that is not too over the top. Yeah, and Harry, Cameron, B'Elanna too. Just like, they don't have a lot to do, but what they do like fits. It's a good role for them, and you can't have every character in every episode have huge roles, and so the ones that have lesser roles, you just got to find the right things to give them to do. So I think, yeah, again, this is such a brilliantly written episode that they're able to find the best uses of every character, and I'll say again that this is Voyager just has such a hard time with this in the later seasons, like utilizing the characters properly. So
Yes.
so I just look at this episode of this two-parter as like the pinnacle of the Voyager writing and like how to utilize the characters. So yeah, I don't have really anything else to say to those characters though.
No, but it's very important. Totally agree. But all right, let's close out the discussion by talking about Anarix, the big villain guest of the week that really makes the episode. Kurtwood Smith. I've actually never watched that 70s show, so I heard he calls people a dumbass or something, but I don't know.
I expect him to say dumbass. I did watch that 70s show when it was on.
Right.
So I do expect him to say dumbass, but I mean, I don't really, because I think a good acting job is making you forget that the other characters that that the actor plays. So I don't actually really. I say that in a joking way. I don't really expect him to say dumbass because he does such a great job. Anyways, back to you.
Well, I actually knew him as the villain in RoboCop. That's where I recognized him from. And in fact, when I saw that 70s show, I'm like, hey, how come the villain from RoboCop is a sitcom, Dad? What the hell?
I thought Ronnie Cox was the villain in RoboCop.
Ronnie Cox was the high-up villain. Kurtwood Smith was the henchman that worked for Ronnie Cox.
I thought it was that.
He had the little circular glasses on and so on. Oh, yeah.
He was one of the dudes who worked for Ronnie Cox, because I always think of that other actor. He was in a bunch of movies in the 80s and always played bad guys. And then the RoboCop, he's snorting coke. And like, it's this different actor who was like always bad guys. That's
I think I know who you're talking about. If you are talking about who I think you're talking about, he actually wasn't really a bad guy. He was just a guy who was corrupt. Like Kurtwood Smith was the leader of the gang.
Yeah, Clarence Bodecker.
I haven't seen RoboCop in 30 years. So I just remember that dude, and I don't remember Kurtwood Smith. So.
Yeah, no, I knew him for like as soon as I saw this episode. I was like, hey, villain from RoboCop. And I think I've seen him in a couple other B movies, but yeah, but he's such a good actor. He shouldn't be in B movies. I think he's too good for sitcoms too.
He chews scenery really well.
That he does, but he doesn't in this episode. Like
no, he doesn't. But he can if they need to.
He can, so, yes, yeah. But I think that's a waste of him, though. I think he's better doing like good roles like this. And he was like played the Cardassian in an episode of Deep Space Nine, where he did a really good job as well. So yeah. Think he's freaking amazing in this role. It's a really subtle performance too, and he does such a good job. He gets a bit obsessive, but yeah, it's a great character arc. The way it starts, the whole episode starts with a scene with him and like wiping a civilization from existence. Like that's such a powerful way to start an episode, and to start it with a guest star and like have the whole teaser be these guest characters that you don't know. I think it reminds me of that episode what's it called, Distant Origins, with the dinosaur aliens, where we're following them for like the first 20 minutes and we see it from their perspective. So they don't do the whole episode like that, but I love how it starts that way, and we get the scenes with them even when there's no Voyager characters around. And I think it gives a lot of life to the Crinum. They're not just the villains of the week. You sort of identify with them more. Someone in the chat, I believe, mentioned that 7 of 9 was channeling a Crinum scientist once in that one episode where she was becoming all the people she assimilated or something. There's also, of course, mention of the Crinum in Discovery last year. It was like that bug, was that time bug device or whatever was made by the Crinum. Yeah,
that was a Crinum.
But yeah, so I think they came, they were fully fleshed out, or like somewhat fleshed out aliens, or interesting aliens, almost entirely due through his performance and through the way this character was written, and just his obsession. Like he had a very clear arc where he became obsessed with getting his wife back. Like at the start of the episode, they got 98% of their empire, and the dude's like, "Yes, we did it. Let's stop." And he's like, "No." We're not going to do it until it's just perfect. And it just shows like how sort of obsessed he is with getting his wife back. And I think it's the irony that all he needed to do was just stop and he has the perfect life. And it's sort of the message of like that scene at the end. It's so powerful. It really hits me. Not just the fact that his wife is back is okay, but the whole thing with him saying with her like, "Oh, it's a beautiful day, you should make time, enjoy life." And he's like, "You know what, you're right, I can make the time." And of course, time, get it, pun. But but it actually works because it's him like realizing that yes, just enjoy life and stop sort of, if you don't like obsess over getting everything perfect, ruin things. And it's a perfect like moral to the story, and just the way they bookend it, and his whole journey about how he's talking about time is out to get me, and it shows how sort of crazy it is. And again, the actor plays it so well. It's just one. I think when I did my top 10 guest actors of Star Trek, I think he was like my number 2 or number 3 or something. He was in the top 3 for sure. But anyway, yeah, Alyssa, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, once again, I just don't feel like I have a lot to add. It's because you just summed it up perfectly. It's just so interesting to me that among everything else that we're talking about that's great about these episodes, that they frame it around this villain. But he's not, I mean, he's the villain, but he's not like a true villain. Like he's a character that you can empathize with. And that's why I kind of empathize with Chakotay a little bit for falling for him a little bit. That you can kind of see like why he's doing the things that he's doing and empathize with him, and yet also see that yeah, he's being way too obsessive, and that's what his downfall is, and that's why he's like the tragic Shakespearean character. But it's unlike a Shakespearean tragedy, we have a positive ending for this character, and I love that they give him that. I love that they give this character that we've been rooting against this whole time this positive ending, this happy ending that he gets to have. And I think that's just beautiful writing. And yeah, I agree. Kurtwood Smith is a really good actor, and because I did kind of get trapped in that 70s show for a little while, I didn't realize like how good of an actor he can be. Don't even get me started on that 90s show. I tried to watch that 90s show for 15 minutes and it was like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And then when other people were like, "Oh, are we going to watch the new Frasier?" No, I am not, because those reboots of sitcoms suck. So, such a waste of his talents. He is such a good actor. And and he's also, he's acting to really good writing. He's got this is just such strong writing where you can really empathize with the not only a guest character but the character that's been set up as the villain, and that you're happy when he's happy at the end of it. Like, good for you, man. So it's just so good, just all the way around, just so good.
Well, yeah, and I think the strength of his antagonist is the fact that he never becomes a mustache-twirling villain. He's never mwahahaha. He's obsessive, but he's never vindictive. He doesn't care about anybody else or any other things, or really Voyager, outside of the fact that they fucked up his equations. That's really his only kind of interest, and otherwise they're mostly dismissive. He is hyper-focused on what that he wants, to the extent of losing sight of everything else. And yeah, that ultimate quest for perfection. So yeah, I think that's what keeps him such a good and relatable villain, and even why he does appeal to Chakotay, because he does seem like, it's like, look, he's got an eye, he's not nuts, he's got a plan there, and if there's a way to do that, yeah, who doesn't hurt if they're still existent? Though the fact that he introduces their food to like, well, there's a food that doesn't exist for anymore, and there's a culture that won't create any more dishes of that. And I mean, that's kind of a nasty thing to have as a sort of a welcome meal. If anything, showing you the power that you have to be able to destroy and wipe out all of these civilizations and no longer really care about that. But again, he never feels vindictive. He never feels aggressive in any sense outside of obsessive for his own thing. And I think that's what keeps him as an interesting villain. And yeah, at the end, that by giving up this pursuit, he could have back what it is that he really wanted. But again, he started with that, and then he was like, but I wanted to have our better, empire. And that's going to end up screwing things up. So his ability to be effectively reset and to have that moment where instead of obsessing through that night with the equation that might be the breakthrough that does the thing that starts the whole sequence of events, that this second chance gives him an opportunity to be able to step away and appreciate what he has now and appreciate that moment with his wife that he, regrets losing so much, so much longer into his craziness. So yeah, I think that's what makes what he's able to pull off with the character is not make him overly evil, but more of an understandable. And thus, when he gets his kind of second chance at the end, we feel good about him, that maybe he won't make that same mistake again, and the world will be a better place. I don't know. I always feel that everybody gets a chance, deserves a chance at redemption. And when you have stories like this, I think that's why they appeal to us, is you can find somebody that even is losing so much and has suffered so much and becomes obsessive so much because of that loss, that given another opportunity, maybe they just make the right choice and appreciate what they have going forward. So, I don't know. That's why it always kind of, I think, rings a little extra strong with me. But I think Kurtwood Smith, does an amazing job of keeping the character very real and grounded, so that we can take that journey with him.
I think it is a trick of the episode, like something it pulls off to give the villain a happy ending and make the audience feel good about it, make the audience feel happy about it. Like that is a rare thing.
Totally.
Yeah. The fact that they're able to do this, I'm sorry to harp on future Voyager seasons, but the fact that they're able to do this with the villain just makes it so much harder to digest the Borg Queen later. Where
oh God,
one of the most mustache twirly villains. That everyone deserves redemption except for the fucking Borg Queen. Fuck her. Like, fuck that character. So it just makes me really want to savor this episode. It's just how many things it just does so well, and the villain is just another example.
Yeah, I mean, Voyager's been very inconsistent, and the last 3 seasons it was a downhill slide. But it's episodes like these that still make me love the show, despite its flaws, despite the fact that it should have been serialized. It would have been way better if it was. But there's not just this episode, but other episodes I covered, like Timeless and Deadlock and whatnot, in my top 25 that show they're still it's still a great show because they can still have good episodes like this one. All right, so we'll go ahead and end the discussion there with the particular question. We'll start as always with Alyssa because I know the answer. Where would you rank this? Higher than me, lower than me, or around the same?
Around the same, but slightly lower. This is one of the closer ones that we've had. Sometimes we're really far off. But of course, those who know my channel know I did my top 100 last year, and the Year of Hell came in at number 7. So very close to this. I think our main difference in opinion is I do like Scorpion slightly better because I had Scorpion at number 6 and you had Scorpion back in the teens. But yeah, I'm very, very close with you. I have it in my top 10 and all of Star Trek, all 800 whatever episodes that they made. Uh, in the grand scheme of things, with like 800 episodes, the difference between number 5 and number 7 is very, very, very minimal. So we're almost right on par.
Yeah, and this is my favorite episode of Voyager, and this would be your second favorite. So still, that's very
Yeah,
very
second favorite
close.
by like a nudge. Like I have
Yeah.
like Scorpion like by like a little sliver, and only probably because I had a little more nostalgia associated with Scorpion. And that's really what put it over the top. But they're just kind of like right there with each other. So yeah.
I have this just real quick. I have this memory of going to Papa John's, working at Papa John's after this episode aired, and going to Weird Andy and be like, "Oh my God, Year of Hell is so awesome! You have to watch it." So that's my memory of seeing it when it first came out.
Weird Andy coming up
Yeah.
coming up in your videos recently.
Yeah. Well,
You
yeah,
know,
this guy we used to know.
we used to work
call
with
him
and know,
Weird.
yeah. Yeah, Weird Andy. He was a weird dude.
Yeah, well, with the name Weird Andy, you're kind of like,
I mean, he didn't call himself that. We called him that.
Yeah.
you mean Andy or Weird Andy?
Yeah, but this is the second live stream you've done in the
Yeah,
last
I
couple
mentioned
weeks
it.
where you've referenced this guy we used to know. But yeah.
So anyway, Darren, I'll ask you the question.
I think you're spot on because I'm with you. This is, in fact, my favorite Voyager episode also for all of the reasons that we have talked about tonight. I think it's just incredibly well done. I think it's a great story. I love the consequences. I love Kurtwood Smith as a villain. And ultimately, it's because this is the episode that suffers the promise of the premise of what would happen if you're out in the middle of nowhere and it's just you. Is your ship's going to look like crap? Probably pretty quickly. You know, this would have been, you could just sort of imagine if this was stretched out and you get damaged and then repairs and you get a little bit of this culture coming in and you get a little bit of this culture coming in. I mean, kind of way that was nice about Scorpion when you got a little bit of the Borg stuff attached onto the ship and things. It's like by the end, you're kind of hoping that that's what Voyager is going to look like, is this kind of like its own little dreadnought of like, we're going to get through these seas of space, no matter what conditions that we run into. So the fact that at least we got a little bit of an insight of what that could look like and what those consequences would be and what the potential stories you really could have carried forward, I think is what really makes this episode. So, I mean, it does a great job unto itself, but I think it also gives you an insight of what could have been. And I think that's very much what Voyager should have been all the time. But at least we got to see this.
Yeah, I do think of how much better this show would have been if this was in this whole season or if this was more often. But yeah, at least we got this. This is definitely the show at its peak. So you think 5 is about a
oh yeah, man, cracking the top 5 of all Star Trek episodes. Yeah, I think this is a good place for it. I mean, it would certainly be up here. I got to see how the rest of the top 5 pans out before I can give an ultimate kind of placement. But I think, much like Alyssa had said, what is 1 or 2 placements of anything once you're at this point of the list? It's like, I woke up and I thought this tasted better today, and then this one will taste a little better today, and that's going to be my favorite. So, yeah, no, I think this is right about the perfect place.
Yeah, I mean, once you get into top 10 out of 800 or something, you're it's all splitting hairs.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll go ahead and end this video here. So thank everyone who showed up. Brandon showed up late. How's it going? And also Norman and Fonz were in earlier. And anyone watching this who didn't come in, good. Thanks for dropping by. And anyone watching the archives, thanks for checking this out. And of course, big thanks to my guests, Alyssa and Darren. So let's just shout out what you're up to, if you're up to anything? We'll start with you, Darren.
I am up to nothing right now. Just did a season finale discussion of Penguin over with Rob at Smirking Gun Reviews. So you can find that up on his channel, probably in the live tab. But probably taking a little break for some time going forward with the holidays and everything coming up. I've got a couple movie stuff with Rob in the hopper that we're thinking of doing. So you can always check that out, or hopefully I'll be here for at least the next 4 top 25 Star Trek episodes with this guy right here and this girl right here. I gotta get the angles right. You know where I'm talking now.
All right, and Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Alyssa on Alyssa Jean's Reviews. I'm not making as much content as I had in the past, but I did just release my review for the first 5 episodes of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5, and I will have a pretty busy December because I will be doing the second half of the season review. I will also be doing my annual awards video when I will award my shows for my picks for the most underrated, most overrated show, worst show that I watched in the year. And then at the end of the year, I will do my top 10 for the year of 2024, top 10 TV shows that I personally watched. And then I'm also going to do a live chat with Wine sometime in December. So stay tuned to Alyssa Jean's Reviews. I actually have probably the busiest month that I've had in a while upcoming. So check me out.
Cool. And if you're finding my channel for the first time, my name's Mark. Channel is Enchantment of Eternity. Do these live top 10 or top 25. As we say, only 4 left. So do those once a month. In the meantime, I'm covering Star Trek Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, currently in Next Generation Season 7 and Deep Space Nine Season 2. And of course, also covering new episodes of Lower Decks as they come out as well. So you can check me out for that and many other things. And thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.